Ethan Harrington was the pride of his small coastal town. From a young age, he was surrounded by the kind of love, wealth, and values that shaped him into the extraordinary man he would one day become. His father, Richard Harrington, was a historian of international acclaim, renowned for his collection of rare manuscripts and artifacts. His work was not just a career, but a passion, one that connected the past to the present and gave meaning to history. Ethan would often sit in his father's study, fascinated by tales of ancient civilizations and the priceless relics displayed like treasures from another world. His mother, Evelyn, was no less remarkable. A neuroscientist whose groundbreaking research earned her national recognition, she was the kind of woman who could captivate a room with her intellect and grace. Despite their prestige and wealth, the Harringtons were a family rooted in humility. Evelyn often said, "Our privilege is meaningless if we don't use it to lift others." It was a lesson Ethan absorbed deeply. Together, Richard and Evelyn not only built an empire, but also a reputation as the kindest, most generous people in town, known for funding scholarships, building libraries, and supporting the community at every turn. Ethan thrived in this environment. As a child, he displayed a rare mix of curiosity, intelligence, and kindness that set him apart. He wasn't just the son of wealthy parents, he was a boy who loved learning, a boy who cared deeply about the world around him. His teachers marveled at his potential, and his peers admired his humility. It seemed the Harrington legacy would not only endure but thrive in Ethan's capable hands. But life, with all its unpredictability, was not always kind. When Ethan turned 16, tragedy struck the Harrington household. Evelyn, the cornerstone of their family, suffered a sudden aneurysm that claimed her life without warning. The loss was devastating. Ethan, who had always seen his mother as a pillar of strength, found himself grappling with an emptiness he couldn't understand. Richard, too, was broken, but he refused to let grief define their lives. He turned his pain into purpose, devoting himself to his son and ensuring that Ethan would have the support and love he needed to navigate life without his mother. For years, it was just Ethan and Richard. They shared a bond that went beyond father and son, more like two companions leaning on each other in the face of loss. It wasn't easy, but their mutual love and respect carried them through. Then one day, Richard announced he was remarrying. Camille entered their lives like a soft breeze, charming, poised, and seemingly genuine. She brought with her a teenage son, Liam, from a previous marriage. At first, Ethan struggled with the idea of someone else taking his mother's place. The very thought felt like a betrayal to Evelyn's memory. But Camille worked her way into Ethan's heart with kindness and patience. She never tried to replace Evelyn. Instead, she filled the household with a warmth that had been missing since her death. Liam, on the other hand, was a bit more complicated. While he seemed eager to bond with Ethan, there were moments when his actions felt more calculated than genuine. Ethan, wanting to honor his father's happiness, gave them both the benefit of the doubt. Over time, he began to see them as part of his family, though a small voice in the back of his mind told him to stay cautious. Despite the challenges, Ethan's life began to stabilize. He excelled in school, carrying forward the Harrington legacy of academic brilliance. By the time he graduated, he had developed a deep interest in archaeology, inspired by the countless hours spent exploring his father's collection. Ethan dreamed of uncovering the secrets of the past, of discovering stories hidden in the sands of time. Little did he know his own life would soon become a story no one could have anticipated. Richard was overjoyed when Ethan decided to follow in his footsteps. After graduating with honors in archaeology, Ethan wasted no time pursuing his dreams. His natural curiosity and sharp intellect made him a rising star in the field. He quickly gained recognition for his ability to uncover artifacts that others had overlooked, often finding connections between them that told stories of ancient civilizations. Ethan's work wasn't just academic. It brought history to life, and he loved every moment of it. Meanwhile, Richard continued to support him, proudly watching as his son built a name for himself. Together, they curated one of the most prestigious private collections of artifacts in the country. Their estate became a treasure trove of history, housing relics that ranged from medieval manuscripts to ancient sculptures. Scholars from all over the world sought permission to study their collection, and Ethan welcomed them with the same generosity his parents had always shown. Life seemed perfect for a time, but it was not without its shadows. Richard's health began to decline. At first it was minor, a persistent cough, a little fatigue, but it gradually worsened. Doctors diagnosed him with a chronic illness that gave him only a few years to live. Ethan was devastated, but he resolved to make the most of the time they had left. Together they poured their energy into expanding the collection and preparing for its eventual public display. When Richard passed away, Ethan found himself alone in the world, his grief almost unbearable. The estate, the collection, and the legacy now rested entirely on his shoulders. Though he had inherited his father's brilliance and integrity, Ethan often felt unprepared for the weight of responsibility. Camille and Liam, now his only family, offered their support. At first, Ethan was hesitant to lean on them, but Camille, ever patient and kind, proved to be a source of comfort. Liam, too, seemed to genuinely care, and the bond they had started to build years earlier grew stronger. It was during this time that Ethan made a decision that would change the course of his life. The Harrington estate, with its vast collection, was too valuable to keep hidden. Inspired by his parents' dedication to education and community, he chose to transform the estate into a public museum. The community was thrilled by the news. Ethan personally oversaw the renovations, ensuring that the artifacts were displayed in a way that celebrated their cultural significance. The grand opening of the museum was a resounding success. Visitors marveled at the collection, and Ethan's dedication earned him admiration from all corners. He even initiated programs to fund archaeological research and provide scholarships for aspiring historians and archaeologists. His work not only preserved history, but also inspired the next generation to carry it forward. It seemed that Ethan had finally found a sense of purpose amidst his grief. But life, as always, had more twists in store. Camille and Liam continued to play a supportive role in Ethan's life, but there were moments when their behavior raised subtle red flags. Liam, in particular, seemed to take an unusual interest in the collection's most valuable items. Ethan, wanting to believe in the family they had become, dismissed these concerns as paranoia. After all, hadn't they stood by him during his darkest days? For a while, life carried on peacefully, with the museum thriving and Ethan finding new meaning in his work. Then, one morning, everything changed. Camille burst into the museum in tears, claiming she had found Ethan unresponsive in his private study. Paramedics were called, but it was too late. Ethan was pronounced dead at the scene. The news spread like wildfire, leaving the town in shock. Ethan Harrington, the man who had brought so much life and hope to the community, was gone, or so everyone thought. The loss of Ethan Harrington devastated the community. The man who had dedicated his life to preserving history and uplifting others was gone too soon. People gathered outside the museum, leaving flowers, candles, and notes of condolence. Ethan's generosity had touched countless lives, and his death left a void that seemed impossible to fill. Camille, appearing heartbroken, took charge of the funeral arrangements. Tearfully, she explained to the authorities that Ethan had suffered from a rare neurological condition, a fact she claimed he had kept private from everyone except her and his closest doctors. To substantiate her claim, she produced medical records detailing the supposed diagnosis. Her explanation was met with sympathy, and the authorities decided against performing an autopsy, accepting her assertion that the condition had caused his sudden death. While the community grieved, Camille began organizing the funeral with what seemed like a deep sense of duty. She reached out to prominent figures in archaeology and history, inviting them to pay their respects. The service promised to be a grand affair, befitting the legacy of someone as impactful as Ethan Harrington. Late one evening, as Camille was finalizing the arrangements, she came across an article online. It described a group of scientists conducting groundbreaking research on post-mortem phenomena. These scientists had developed advanced technology that allowed them to monitor cellular activity and other unexplained occurrences in recently deceased individuals. Using cameras and sensors installed in coffins, they collected data to study the mysteries of death and the potential for anomalies after burial. Intrigued, Camille contacted the research team, presenting herself as a grieving family member who wanted to honor her loved one's passion for knowledge. She explained Ethan's love for science and history, framing her decision as a way to continue his legacy. The scientists were moved by her story and agreed to include Ethan in their research. They sent her the necessary documentation, which Camille signed without hesitation. The researchers discreetly outfitted Ethan's casket with cameras and sensors. The cameras were designed to transmit footage each evening, capturing detailed recordings for up to a year. To ensure the process remained confidential, the modifications were made before the funeral, with no one outside the research team aware of what had been done. The funeral was a solemn and emotional event, attended by hundreds. Friends, colleagues, and admirers filled the grand hall where the service was held. Camille delivered a heartfelt eulogy, speaking of Ethan's brilliance, kindness, and dedication to preserving history. Tears streamed down her face as she described his impact on the world and her immense grief at losing him. Liam stood beside her, silent and somber, a picture of mourning. As the ceremony drew to a close, the casket was lowered into the ground amidst a sea of tears and farewells. Camille lingered by the grave longer than anyone else, her hands trembling as she placed a single rose on the freshly turned earth. She appeared to be a grieving stepmother, overwhelmed by the loss of someone she had come to see as her own son. Later that night, as the town settled into quiet mourning, the scientists eagerly gathered to review the first transmission from the cameras installed in Ethan's casket. They had no idea that the footage they were about to see would defy everything they thought they knew about their research. The scientists huddled around the monitor as the clock struck 9 p.m., the scheduled time for the first transmission. The screen flickered to life, displaying the interior of Ethan's casket. At first, everything appeared as expected. The dim light from the camera revealed the still figure of Ethan lying motionless, the serene expression on his face suggesting eternal rest. The researchers prepared to document the baseline data, noting the casket's temperature, atmospheric conditions, and other variables. But then, something happened that no one had anticipated. One of the researchers gasped as the camera captured a faint movement. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, a slight twitch of Ethan's fingers. The team froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. Moments later, his chest heaved ever so slightly, a shallow breath breaking the eerie stillness. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and his face contorted in confusion and panic as he realized his surroundings. He was alive. Ethan's weak movements grew frantic. His hands pressed against the interior of the coffin as he struggled to push the lid open, but his efforts were futile. His breathing became labored and his eyes darted around, searching for a way out. The researchers were paralyzed with shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The camera had been installed to study a corpse, not document a man fighting for his life inside his own grave. The lead scientist snapped out of his stupor and shouted for the team to act. They quickly recorded the footage onto a secure drive and contacted the local police, explaining the situation in hurried, almost incoherent words. The officer on duty initially dismissed their claims, thinking it was some kind of prank. It wasn't until the scientists sent a clip of the footage that the gravity of the situation sank in. Within minutes, a rescue operation was launched. Police officers and emergency responders raced to the cemetery, guided by the researchers' urgent instructions. The town, silent under the cover of night, remained unaware of the extraordinary event unfolding in its midst. When the team arrived at Ethan's grave, they wasted no time. Shovels hit the dirt with relentless speed, and the officers worked tirelessly to uncover the casket. The moment the casket was lifted from the ground, everyone held their breath. The lid was pried open, revealing Ethan, pale and gasping for air, but very much alive. The responders quickly pulled him out and rushed him to the hospital, where doctors worked to stabilize him. It was a miraculous turn of events, one that defied explanation. News of the discovery was kept tightly under wraps, with the scientists and police agreeing to withhold details until they could understand what had happened. When Ethan regained consciousness, his voice was weak but filled with urgency. He had something to say, something that couldn't wait. The medical staff leaned in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern, as Ethan began to recount the events leading up to his supposed death. Ethan's voice trembled as he recounted the events, his words slow and deliberate as he fought to gather his strength. He explained how, in the weeks leading up to his death, he had grown increasingly suspicious of Camille and Liam. Strange discrepancies in the museum's finances had caught his attention. Funds meant for renovations and new acquisitions were missing, and several transactions bore Liam's name. Ethan initially thought it might be a mistake, but the more he investigated, the clearer it became that this was no accident. Ethan began watching Camille and Liam more closely, noting their behaviors and conversations. On several occasions, he overheard Liam talking about certain artifacts with an unusual intensity, particularly those with high market value. Camille, always attentive and warm, seemed uncharacteristically evasive when Ethan questioned her about the museum's accounts. Though his suspicions grew, Ethan couldn't bring himself to confront them immediately. Part of him didn't want to believe his family could betray him. Then, 2 nights before his supposed death, Ethan decided he couldn't ignore the evidence any longer. After moving the museum's most valuable artifacts to a secure location, he confronted Camille in the library of the Harrington estate. The confrontation started civilly enough, but as Ethan laid out the financial records and his findings, Camille's demeanor shifted. Her warm, motherly exterior faded, replaced by cold calculation. She didn't deny the accusations. Instead, she justified them, claiming that Liam deserved a future worthy of the Harrington name, one she felt Ethan wasn't sharing. "I didn't raise a thief," Ethan had said firmly, his voice filled with disappointment. Camille's face hardened, and she responded with chilling calmness. "You wouldn't understand what a mother is willing to do for her child." The next evening, Liam invited Ethan to dinner as an apparent peace offering. Although wary, Ethan accepted, thinking it might be a chance to mend the fractured trust between them. Camille served wine and they shared polite conversation. But within minutes of taking his first sip, Ethan felt strange. A heaviness settled over him, and his vision blurred. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out beneath him. Camille and Liam rushed to his side, pretending to help, but he could hear the panic in their voices. As the drug took hold, Ethan realized what had happened. He could barely move, his body paralyzed, but his mind remained painfully aware. He remembered Camille whispering to Liam, "This will keep him quiet, we'll handle the rest tomorrow." He wanted to scream, to fight back, but the drug rendered him powerless. The last thing he remembered before everything went dark was being carried to his study and left on the floor. The hospital room fell silent as Ethan finished his story. The nurses and police officers who had gathered to listen exchanged horrified glances. The gravity of what had been done to him was unmistakable. Camille and Liam had not only betrayed him, but had come dangerously close to ending his life for the sake of greed. One of the detectives stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Mr. Harrington, do you know where the artifacts are now?" Ethan nodded. "I moved them to a warehouse in the next town. They're safe." The detective turned to his team, issuing orders to locate and secure the artifacts immediately. Camille and Liam's betrayal had gone deeper than anyone had imagined, and it was clear they had planned to take full advantage of Ethan's absence. But now, thanks to the scientists' unexpected intervention, their plot had been exposed. As Ethan rested in the hospital, the police wasted no time launching an investigation. Armed with the details provided by Ethan, they obtained a warrant to search the Harrington estate. The officers meticulously combed through the house, focusing on Camille and Liam's living quarters and personal belongings. What they found only solidified Ethan's claims. Hidden within Camille's desk were forged financial documents, fake receipts, and ledgers that showed a clear trail of the embezzled funds. In Liam's room, they discovered a detailed list of the most valuable artifacts in the Harrington collection, along with notes about potential buyers. It was evident that Camille and Liam had been planning this betrayal for months, carefully orchestrating their scheme while feigning support for Ethan. Their goal was clear: remove Ethan from the picture, claim ownership of the estate, and sell the priceless artifacts on the black market. What they hadn't anticipated was Ethan's vigilance and the unforeseen role of the scientists' research. The detectives also followed Ethan's lead to the secure warehouse where he had hidden the artifacts. They found the collection intact, safely stored just as Ethan had described. The discovery not only preserved the legacy of the Harrington family, but also served as irrefutable evidence of Camille and Liam's malicious intent. With their scheme fully exposed, the police moved quickly to apprehend them. Early the next morning, officers arrived at the Harrington estate. Camille was in the kitchen when she heard the sharp knock on the door. When she opened it, her face paled at the sight of the uniformed officers standing before her. Liam appeared moments later, his confident demeanor quickly fading as the officers explained they were under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and theft. Camille tried to protest, tears streaming down her face, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Both were taken into custody and transported to the police station for questioning. At the station, Camille initially maintained her innocence, claiming that Ethan's accusations were baseless. But as the evidence was laid out before her, the forged documents, the list of artifacts, and Ethan's testimony, her resolve began to crumble. Realizing there was no way out, Camille broke down and confessed. She admitted to drugging Ethan with a powerful sedative, intending to stage his death so she and Liam could carry out their plan without interference. She insisted that it was all Liam's idea, though investigators suspected otherwise. Liam, on the other hand, was far less remorseful. During his interrogation, he scoffed at the accusations, calling Ethan naive, and claiming that he and his mother deserved more from the Harrington estate. His arrogance and lack of regret only fueled the case against him, ensuring that the charges would stick. Meanwhile, news of Ethan's survival and the betrayal by his stepmother and stepbrother began to spread through the town. The community, initially overwhelmed with grief at his supposed death, was now gripped by shock and outrage. Ethan had been a beacon of hope and generosity, and the thought that his own family had tried to destroy him left everyone reeling. Messages of support poured in, with townspeople expressing their relief that he was alive and pledging their help in any way they could. As Ethan recovered in the hospital, he reflected on the events of the past few days. The betrayal cut deeply, but he was grateful to be alive and to have uncovered the truth before it was too late. More than anything, he was determined to ensure that Camille and Liam faced the consequences of their actions. He worked closely with the police, providing additional details and context that would strengthen the case against them. The trial of Camille and Liam became the talk of the town. The courtroom was packed with reporters, community members, and even a few of Ethan's colleagues from the archaeological world. Everyone wanted to witness the outcome of a case that had shaken the community to its core. Camille and Liam faced a long list of charges, including attempted murder, fraud, and theft, all backed by overwhelming evidence. Ethan, though still recovering from the ordeal, appeared in court to testify. His presence was a powerful reminder of what could have been lost. Dressed in a modest suit, he recounted the events with a calm determination that left the courtroom riveted. When he described the moment he woke up inside the coffin, gasping for air and terrified, the silence was deafening. Even the judge seemed visibly moved by his harrowing account. Camille sat quietly, her face pale and drawn. Her once confident demeanor had been replaced by a mixture of shame and resignation. Liam, however, remained defiant, glaring at Ethan as if blaming him for their predicament. When it was his turn to speak, he showed no remorse, instead attempting to paint Ethan as the villain. His arguments fell flat, especially in the face of the mountain of evidence against him. The prosecution presented the forged documents, the list of artifacts, and the footage from the coffin's camera as evidence. They played the clip of Ethan struggling inside the casket for the jury, and the gasps that filled the room spoke volumes. The lead prosecutor made it clear that Camille and Liam's actions were not just acts of greed, but deliberate and calculated attempts to destroy a man who had done nothing but trust them. Camille's defense attorney attempted to argue that her actions were driven by desperation, claiming she had been manipulated by Liam. But her confession and the evidence painted a different picture. A woman who had willingly betrayed the man who had welcomed her into his life. Liam's defense was even weaker, as his arrogance and lack of remorse worked against him. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before reaching their verdict. Both Camille and Liam were found guilty on all charges. The sentencing was swift and severe. Camille was given 25 years in prison for her role in the plot, with the judge emphasizing the betrayal of trust and the calculated nature of her actions. Liam received a 30-year sentence, his lack of remorse and leadership in the scheme earning him a harsher punishment. As they were led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, Camille glanced back at Ethan with tears in her eyes. Liam, however, refused to meet his gaze, his expression one of cold defiance. With the trial behind him, Ethan began the long process of rebuilding his life. The betrayal he had endured was a wound that would take time to heal, but he refused to let it define him. The community rallied around him, offering their unwavering support and helping him move forward. Ethan channeled his pain into something constructive, creating a foundation dedicated to ethical historical preservation and the promotion of transparency in museum management. The Harrington Museum reopened with renewed purpose. Ethan ensured that every artifact was properly cataloged and that the museum operated with the integrity his parents had instilled in him. Visitors flocked to see the collection, now more valuable than ever, not just for its historical significance but for the incredible story that surrounded it. Though the memories of what had happened lingered, Ethan chose to focus on the future. He knew he had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at continuing the legacy his parents had built. And in that he found a sense of peace and purpose that nothing could take away.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.